Well, how's it going? Today we're going to work with API consumption, okay? This is a pretty important part when it comes to extracting data from a source, from a company that offers its data, and what we're going to do now is simply consume it. Alright, let's activate the environment before we get started. To open the terminal, Control+N, you know the drill. And then, well, now we're going to activate the environment. /scripts. Let's see. Sorry, the / environment name, Python. In lowercase, if possible. Python / again, scripts / activate. And as always, you can check that the environment is activated when it appears in parentheses. Alright, perfect. Now we're going to create a new file. In this case, let's do it in the console and let's call it API consumption, APIs, py. Perfect. We'll work on it as a .py file, but you can also work on it as a Python notebook, okay? A Jupyter notebook. Alright, the first thing we need is the requests library, which let's see if it's installed. Alright, so now, Control+S, I save it. I'm in my folder and now, instead of running cells, we're going to run the file directly, okay? Because it's a Python file, not a notebook file. So, type Python, the name of the file, which in this case is consumopis. Alright, let's run it. And, okay, if the terminal returns with the environment activated in your path, that means request is working, alright? In that case, it's already a library, a module that Python has, and if you don't have it, remember, pip install requests, okay? But it's already a module that's integrated with Python, so it works perfectly. Alright, second. When we want to consume an API, okay? You have to look for the URL of the API, alright? Which in this case is right here. If I press Control and click, I can access it, okay? So, here we can see our API. We want to get to this JSON file and somehow extract the data, but usually you'll see it like this, the API, okay? This is basically an API that tracks or stores the COVID data for the United States. So, these APIs can be free APIs, like this one here, or paid APIs. For example, to do stock trading, you can get all the tickers, the candlesticks, by the minute, by the second, alright? For trading purposes. Or they can be APIs that only let you make a certain number of requests. What is a request? Well, basically, if an API gives you one row, right? Maybe it only lets you get 1,000 rows, and then you'll have to wait. So, what I mean is, every API is its own thing. You have to read the documentation, which in this case is right here, and see how to access it, okay? How it gives you the data and what conditions it has. Alright, perfect. So let's continue. Once we have the URL defined, we need to make a response, okay? So, we create a variable called response request, which means the request. And where do we want to make the request? Well, a get to a URL, right? This one might not work. Okay, perfect. And well, once the response is done, do a print there so it shows up in the console, okay? So, let's use the previous command again, Python API consumption, in the terminal. And let's see what it tells us now. Response 200, okay? Every website, when you access it, you make a request, right? It's going to give you a code that goes from 0 to 1, from 100 to 500, I think. Each code has its own meaning. For example, a 500 means it's denied, a 400 means it can't be found, and a 200 means you've been allowed to enter the page, okay? For more information, just Google website codes, okay? And you can see what each code means, because there are tons of codes, alright? Perfect. So once we've done the respo, the response, we've entered the page and everything is fine, okay? We can keep taking the previous data and turning it into a JSON, okay? So we just go to response, right? We have a JSON, and we create a variable called data, okay? We print the variable, print data, and then, well, we save the file with Control S and run the previous command again, which is Python and the name of the file.py. And let's see what it returns now. It should return the response and the data. And as you can see, here it has spit out all the data, that whole JSON dictionary you can see on this page that I showed you earlier, okay? I'll open it again. 222. Here we can see all the data. We've made it here. Now we just need to organize the data or transform it and capture whatever we want to select, okay? Let's continue. All right, once I have the data, well, for example, let's take a look here for a moment. I think the interesting thing about this data, okay? You have the status in case it's positive because it's about COVID, just to remind you if it was negative, and quite a few variables data collected about COVID. What I'm going to do in this case is make a small loop and we're going to get the statuses, okay? We've sorted everything by status to get the data and see it a bit more organized, okay? Print stage. Well, you can put anything here, just a reminder. Print stage, okay? And it's the same thing. We save. We go back to the terminal. If we type clear, I think, or CLS, we can clear it and bring back the previous command. Python API consumption, and here it shows up as stage in the loop, okay? Okay, yes, the loop runs. That's everything it returns if you use stage. So, what we're going to do now is, it's going to be something else. It's going to be state. You're going to access the state field, okay? And we're going to save it in a variable called states. Okay, so this way we simply access each row. We access the state field and save it in a variable. And then, what else? Well, let's put row here to make it clearer, because otherwise you won't understand, okay? So, each row is, let's say, a dictionary, okay? With its key, and when it ends, this would be the iterated object, right? So, since each row is this, two curly braces, right? Here you can see another brace, another iteration. So, with row and state, what we do is capture the state field, right? And here it says Oklahoma, which yes, I think means Oklahoma dash. Okay, so let's grab more fields. For example, the positive cases. PSI type cases, right? Same thing. We take the row, which would refer to this dictionary, the dictionary field, and positive, which look, you know what? We can just copy it here directly, and that way we don't miswrite. I mean, we don't make a mistake typing it, right? Positive, let's see if in this case it was positive and the person died. Yes. Same thing, row, and to access the field, let's see. It's around here, let's see. Deaths, right? Since I'm not going to find it and I already have the code ready here, I'm just going to copy it directly. Deaths, okay? So, we're capturing these three fields. And now, what do we have to do? Let's print the fields to see what we selected. Let's do a print here, an F string, so we can include the dictionary inside the comment. And here we're going to put states. Let's put state. We also call this state, okay? Because everything is in English, but the course is in Spanish, a mix of English and Spanish, because it's impossible to do the course entirely in English, but everything that can be explained in Spanish, especially the mathematical explanations in data science, will be positives, 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 and then we'll do deaths, 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 perfect. And now, perfect. So, as I explained to you earlier well, let's do this first and then I'll explain something about exceptions, okay? Same thing, we save the file, so the white dot appears here, and we go back to the console. We run the file, and in this case, I'm going to remove this print so it doesn't spit out all this data, okay? I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it here, comment it out in the code, okay? But if you're following the video, you can uncomment the line by pressing Control C held down. All right. So now we have the data looking really nice here. We have the state, the number of positive cases in that state, and the deaths that occurred, okay? So we see that here in Arkansas, I don't know what the state is like. Look, in this case, California. So, we saw that here 3 million people got infected and 50,000 died, right? Well, here, for example, in, I don't know, maybe Minnesota, 600,000 people got infected and 16,000 died. All right, perfect. So, we've managed to build the API and transform the data so we can use it. Now, if you want, you can turn it into a data frame, okay? PV point data frame. You need to import pandas. All right. I think it's data, and it's missing the F here, data frame. Perfect. The helper is already showing me, as I like to call it. And let's grab. Uh, uh, uh. All right. First we need to make a dictionary so that it can be converted into a data frame, okay? How do we do that? Well, all right. First of all, we'll need to create empty lists. Well, actually, an empty dictionary before the loop so an empty dictionary to be able to iterate and store these variables, okay? Let's make a dictionary here, all right? What will the structure or layout of my dictionary be? A key called estado, and by putting these brackets here, these square brackets, it means the dictionary will be empty, okay? Positives. So basically, it will just be a dictionary that doesn't contain anything. An empty list, right? So we can store what we get from the API. Positives, deaths. Okay. All right, perfect. And now, when we extract the data here, what we're going to do now is perform an append. In other words, it's about iterating over the state and then saving it in the dictionary, right? With an append, we achieve this. So we have the dictionary, and we want to add an append to it, right? MMM. All right, append state. And if I'm not mistaken, you have to specify the field where you want to save it, right? So it would go like this. Sorry. It would be state, right? From the dictionary, I access my state field, right? And then I append the state variable to it, right? Perfect. So here you have to do the same for each field. Perfect. So the positives field, the deaths field. And now I can put my dictionary here so it gets converted into a data frame and I can work with the data I've extracted from my API, right? Then you can put it in a notebook, save it here, do whatever you want, right? Let's run the code again. And this list should appear again. Not this list, this JSON or whatever this is. Let's see. Let the file run. Perfect. Look. A data frame has just been generated, okay? Check it out. Here are the rows. However, notice that I made 3 columns for positives and deaths, but the state has always been saved. Do you know why? Because here I didn't include, let's say, the other variables I wanted to capture, right? The other fields. Let's fix it in a moment. Remember that in programming, no one is an expert, everyone makes mistakes. And we run the code again, okay? Perfect. And now I'm going to explain something about exceptions. Let's see. Now it works fine. So the data frame would look like this. There's a data frame for its column or field or variable, whatever you want to call it, with its values, with the values pulled from the API, okay? Ready to do something with this data. So there's one thing now. I wrote the code perfectly, but since I recorded the video, I already knew it was going to work, okay? I'm going to comment out everything that's a print statement, okay? So the code doesn't have to print anything and runs faster, all right? Not the response, though. And what I'm going to do now, when you work with these kinds of files, okay? You have to use a try, which is like, I'm going to try to extract the data. You never know what's going to happen, right? Let's see, in response, right here. When you work with these kinds of APIs or files where you don't know if you'll have the data or you don't know how they work, because every API is different, okay? You try, all right, to create the data, and if it doesn't work for you, I mean, if there's an error here and you don't know where the error is, okay? What you have to do is catch an exception. Say, all right, do this for me, and if it doesn't work, you're going to write me a message, okay? You're going to write me a message telling me that it didn't work and where it didn't work or what happened, all right? So here I'm going to use request, which is this method, which is a request to a web page, exceptions, and a captured request exception. This one here. As e. I rename it as if it were an exception. And here I'm going to print, with an F string, no. Request could be completed. And I'm going to put the request in parentheses, okay? So that you understand a bit what I mean. And then here I'm going to put the exception, all right? So now, if I run the code, Control-S to save, and then I run the code, everything should work perfectly, okay? Only the response, the 200, showing that I got in successfully, will be printed, okay? But because the code is correct now, but let's test it, all right? Let's see what happens. All right, now when I run it, let's see what happens. Yeah, that's it. Here, response, okay, because the code works, but now I'm going to do something, all right? I'm going to intentionally put the wrong URL here, okay? I'm going to add a bunch of ends here after JSON. Control-S to save, and now I'm going to run the code again, okay? And now to run the code. Now it's trying to look for whatever, and it tells me that Alright. So, let's put the wrong URL. So, in JSON, let's add a couple of extra letters here. Okay, Control S. What I want is for the exception message to pop up. Look, we can see it here. The request could not be completed, which is this message I put here, okay? And here it says that the connection you made, can't be found. You see, here you can already tell that this exception code helped me figure out why I can't access it, you know? The page. That's why it's so useful to catch exceptions in parts of your code, in case you don't know what's going to happen in the code. That's why I ask here. It's an API, and every API is different, so I try to extract that data, in other words, to pull it from this data source. So, you test it, and it's always better to ask, and if not, catch the exception, okay? Alright, and that's it for this video.